Dr. Ethan Cole sat alone in his small clinic on Epsilon Prime, a quiet human colony on the edge of known space. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the old medical reports on his desk. It had been years since he left Earth's advanced hospitals, and now he was just a simple doctor treating minor injuries in a frontier town. But tonight was different. The moment the holographic message appeared in his office, he knew something was wrong. The screen flickered, and a tall, armored figure stood before him. It was a Zerelian, a powerful alien species that ruled many star systems. The creature's golden eyes glowed as it spoke. "Human healer, you have been chosen." Ethan frowned. Chosen for what? The Zerelian's deep voice echoed through the room. "Our princess, Sire of Zelia Prime, is dying. No Zerelian doctor can save her. The king demands that the best healers in the galaxy attempt to cure her." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Zerelians rarely asked for help, especially from humans. Their empire was mighty, proud, and advanced, yet they had come to him. "You think a human can do what your people cannot?" Ethan asked. The alien's expression remained cold. "You do not have a choice. Refusal is not an option." The message ended abruptly, and Ethan felt his heart pounding. Within moments, his clinic doors slammed open. Two heavily armed Zerelian warriors stepped in, their dark blue armor shining under the dim clinic lights. "Come with us," one of them said. Ethan swallowed hard. It was clear he wasn't being asked. A dangerous journey. Ethan had no time to pack, no time to say goodbye. Within minutes, he was aboard a Zerelian warship, soaring through hyperspace towards Zelia Prime. He had heard stories about their homeworld, a place of towering crystal cities, floating palaces, and skies that shimmered with violet and gold. But the tension in the air was clear. The warriors on the ship barely spoke to him. To them, he was an outsider, a lesser being. "Why me?" Ethan finally asked. "There are better doctors in the galaxy." A Zerelian officer, Commander Varric, turned to him. His silver armor reflected the dim light of the ship. "The king's advisors studied your records. You were a top surgeon before you left human space. Your knowledge of nanomedicine and cellular regeneration is rare." Ethan sighed. His past haunted him. He had been one of Earth's best trauma surgeons, but mistake during a war operation had led to his exile. He had sworn never to return to the high-stakes world of medicine again, and yet here he was, dragged into the biggest challenge of his life. Arrival at Zelia Prime. The warship broke through the planet's cloud-covered atmosphere, revealing a world more beautiful than Ethan had imagined. Massive golden spires rose high into the sky, connected by glowing bridges. Flying crafts zipped between towering buildings, and below, the streets shimmered with blue energy fields. The ship landed in the royal citadel, a palace carved from a massive floating crystal. Ethan barely had time to take in the view before being rushed into the medical chamber. Inside, the room was cold and filled with Zerelian doctors wearing long silver robes. They all turned to him with suspicious eyes. Lying in the center of the room, on an elevated medical bed, was Princess Syra. Ethan's breath caught. The princess was barely alive. Her pale violet skin had turned gray, and her breathing was shallow. Strange golden veins ran across her arms, pulsing weakly. Whatever was killing her, it was not a normal disease. King Zorith, a towering figure in golden armor, stood near his daughter. His eyes locked onto Ethan, with an expression of warning and desperation. "Human," the king spoke, his deep voice commanding the room. "Save her, or you will not leave this place alive." Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. He placed a small scanner over the princess's body, watching as holographic data filled the air. His eyes widened. The Zerelian doctors had misdiagnosed her. "This isn't a genetic disease," Ethan said slowly, looking up at the king. "She's infected with an alien parasite. If we don't act fast, she won't survive the next few hours." Murmurs spread across the room. Some of the Zerelian doctors scowled. "You lie," One of them said, "We have studied her condition for weeks." Ethan shook his head, his hand steady as he adjusted his scanner. He projected an image of the microscopic parasite onto the screen. "You missed this," he said. "Your scans don't detect it because it's too small for Zerelian technology to see." The king's eyes darkened. "And you can cure her?" Ethan hesitated. "I can try, but I'll need full control over the medical process." "Impossible," one of the doctors said. "A human cannot be trusted with the life of our princess." The king raised a hand, silencing the room. His golden eyes locked onto Ethan's. "You will have what you need," Zoreth said. "But if you fail, human, there will be no mercy." Ethan took a deep breath. He had one chance. And if he failed, it wouldn't just be the princess who died. He would never leave Zelia alive. Dr. Ethan Cole stood in the grand medical chamber of the royal citadel, surrounded by cold, silver walls that shimmered under the soft blue lights. Alien technology hummed around him, displaying holographic readouts of Princess Styra's failing condition. The tension in the room was heavy. King Zoreth, the ruler of Zelia Prime, stood at the head of the chamber, his golden armor gleaming under the artificial light. His piercing eyes locked onto Ethan. "You will have what you need," the king said, his deep voice unwavering. "But if you fail, you will not leave Zelia alive." Ethan swallowed hard. No pressure, right? He turned his attention back to Princess Styra. She lay motionless on the medical platform, her violet skin dull and gray, her body weak. The strange golden veins that ran along her arms pulsed faintly, as if fighting a silent war within her. Her breathing was shallow, her life hanging by a thread. Ethan had seen critical patients before. He had worked in the human war zones, treating soldiers with life-threatening injuries. But this was different. This was a dying alien princess, and he was the only human on an entire planet of skeptics who believed he didn't belong here. The Zarelian royal doctors stood on the other side of the room, their faces twisted with distrust. One of them, a tall physician with silver tattoos across his forehead, stepped forward. His name was Valix, and he clearly didn't approve of Ethan's presence. "A human doctor." Valix sneered. "The king trusts you, but I do not. Zyrelian medicine is far beyond your kind's primitive knowledge. What makes you think you can do what we cannot?" Ethan ignored him and focused on the holographic scan of the princess's body. The microscopic parasite he had detected earlier was spreading through her bloodstream, attacking her cells like an invading army. "This parasite is not Zerelian in origin," Ethan said, adjusting the scanner. "It's feeding off her neural energy, which is why your medicine isn't working. Your technology isn't designed to detect something this small." Valix scoffed. "You think you are smarter than our greatest healers." Ethan sighed, keeping his patience in check. "No, I think you're looking in the wrong place." He pointed at the scan. "Your treatments are targeting her organs, but the real problem is in her nervous system. If we don't act now, she won't survive the next few hours." The king's eyes darkened at Ethan's words. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, to everyone's surprise, a weak voice whispered, "He is right." All eyes turned to the medical platform. Princess Zyra had spoken. The princess awakens. Her voice was faint, barely more than a whisper, but it sent shockwaves through the room. The princess had been unconscious for days, and now she had spoken because of what the human doctor had said. Ethan moved closer, careful not to startle her. "Princess, can you hear me?" Zyra's golden eyes fluttered open, dim but aware. She struggled to focus, her breathing still weak. "The pain, it is in my mind, not my body." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. The parasite is attacking your nervous system. That's why you're feeling pain deep inside instead of in a specific part of your body." King Zoreth stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Can she be saved?" Ethan took a deep breath. He knew the answer, but he also knew that the treatment he was about to suggest was risky. "Yes," he said, But I need access to your most advanced medical lab and a sample of human nanomedicine from my ship." The Zyrelian doctors whispered among themselves, their distrust growing. Valek stepped forward again. "Nanomedicine. You expect us to allow foreign human technology into our princess's body?" He turned to the king. "This is madness. The risk is too great. If we allow human medicine to mix with Zyrelian biology, the consequences could be..." "Enough." The king's voice silenced the room. His eyes locked onto Ethan. "You are certain this will work?" Ethan hesitated only for a second. "If we do nothing, she dies. If we act now, she has a chance." Zoreth considered his words. He turned to his guards. "Get this human what he needs." The Zyrelian warriors hesitated for only a moment before nodding and leaving the chamber. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He had won the king's approval, for now. A race against time. Ethan was escorted to the Royal Science Wing, a vast, high-tech medical facility filled with floating monitors and glowing surgical pods. It was far beyond anything humans had built, but Zyrelian medicine had its limits, and Ethan was here to push past them. He quickly prepared the nanomedicine. The tiny robotic machines would enter Xyra's bloodstream, locate the parasites, and destroy them without harming her. But as he programmed the treatment, he felt a presence behind him. Human. Ethan turned to see Prince Velos, Xyra's older brother. Unlike the king, Velos did not look pleased. His silver battle armor reflected the lab's bright lights, and his arms were crossed. "I know you think you are saving my sister," Velos said, "but be warned. If your cure harms her, you will not live to regret it." Ethan held his gaze. "I didn't come here to kill your sister, Prince. I came here to save her." Velos studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then do not fail." As the prince walked away, Ethan turned back to his work. The treatment was ready. He carried the small injection device back to the princess's chamber, his heart pounding. This was it. One injection would decide everything: her life, his fate, and the future of human-Zyrelian relations. He took a deep breath and pressed the injector to Xyra's arm. The nanobots entered her bloodstream. Now all they could do was wait. A tense silence filled the royal medical chamber as Dr. Ethan Cole injected the nanomedicine into Princess Xyra's arm. The tiny robotic healers entered her bloodstream, beginning their dangerous mission to hunt and destroy the deadly parasite killing her from within. Ethan stepped back, his heart pounding. This was it. The Zyrelian royal doctors, led by the skeptical Valeks, watched with narrowed eyes. King Zoreth stood still, his expression unreadable, while Prince Velos stood close, arms crossed, as if prepared to tear Ethan apart if anything went wrong. The holographic monitors above Xyra's bed displayed the real-time progress of the nanobots. The tiny machines moved through her veins, searching for the parasitic organisms. Ethan saw the numbers changing. The princess's vital signs were dropping. His stomach tightened. "She's getting weaker," Valek said, his voice sharp. "Your so-called cure is failing." Ethan clenched his jaw. He had expected this. The nanobots weren't just killing the parasite. They were forcing it to fight back. The alien infection was trying to survive, draining more of Xyra's energy in desperation. "We need to hold on," Ethan said. "The nanobots are forcing the infection into a final battle." Battle. Velos snapped. "This is my sister's life you are gambling with, human." Ethan exhaled sharply but didn't turn away from the monitors. "If I stop now, she dies. We need to give it a little more time." King Zoreth remained silent, his piercing golden eyes studying the screens. Minutes felt like hours. Then, something changed. One of the golden veins running across Xyra's arm flickered, then faded. Ethan's pulse quickened. The parasite was losing. "The infection," Valeks whispered. "It's retreating." More golden veins disappeared as the nanobots overwhelmed the parasite, destroying its last defenses. Xyra's breathing, once shallow and weak, grew stronger. The color returned to her violet skin. The tension in the room broke when Scifi let out a soft breath, then opened her eyes. Her golden gaze, now brighter and full of life, met Ethan's. "It is gone," she whispered. Ethan let out a breath of relief. "Yes, princess. You're going to be okay." The king's favor. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the king stepped forward, looking down at his daughter. His hardened face, always unreadable, softened slightly. "You are well?" he asked. Scifi nodded weakly. "I feel whole again, father." Ethan expected relief, maybe gratitude, but what came next shocked him. King Zoreth turned to Ethan, and in front of everyone, lowered his head slightly, a gesture of deep respect among Zerelians. "You have done what none of my kind could," the king said. "You have saved my daughter. You have earned my favor, human." Ethan was speechless. A moment ago, he had been a prisoner, dragged to this planet against his will. Now, he stood before an alien king who had just granted him the highest honor possible. Prince Phalos, however, was not as pleased. His eyes burned with suspicion as he stared at Ethan. "This human is still an outsider," he muttered. "We do not know his true intentions." Ethan sighed. "I didn't do this for power or politics. I did it because she needed help." Phalos still looked doubtful, but Scifi, now sitting up on her bed, spoke softly. "My life belongs to me because of him," she said. "I trust him, Phalos." The prince frowned but said nothing. The king, however, wasn't finished. He turned to his guards. "Prepare a royal feast in the human's honor." A murmur spread through the room. A royal feast? For a human? Ethan blinked. A feast? Zoreth gave him a knowing look. "You saved the life of the princess. Among my people, that means you are no longer a mere outsider." The meaning of those words sank in. He was no longer just a visitor. Ethan Cole had just become an honored guest of the Zerelian Empire. But even as the celebrations began, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was far from over. There were still many who did not trust him, and he had a feeling that his presence on Zelia had drawn dangerous attention. The grand royal feast was unlike anything Dr. Ethan Cole had ever seen. The banquet hall inside the Zerelian palace was massive, with towering crystal pillars that shimmered under soft golden lights. The ceiling displayed a holographic view of space, showing distant stars and planets moving slowly across the sky. Long tables were covered with exotic dishes, strange glowing fruits, sizzling meats, and liquid-filled spheres that floated before being sipped like a drink. The air was filled with a rich, spicy aroma that was both strange and inviting. Ethan sat near the head of the table, a place of honor given only to those favored by the king. To his left sat Princess Scifi, fully recovered, her golden eyes full of warmth and quiet strength. To his right was King Zoreth, the mighty ruler of Zelia, who had publicly acknowledged Ethan's success in saving his daughter's life. The feast should have been a celebration, but Ethan could feel it. Not everyone was happy. Across the table, Prince Phalos sat stiffly, his sharp gaze locked onto Ethan like a predator watching prey. Beside him, a group of high-ranking Zerelian officials whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing at the human doctor with thinly veiled suspicion. Ethan picked up a small silver cup filled with a bright blue liquid and sniffed it cautiously. Scifi smiled. "It is called Zera nectar. It is safe for humans." Ethan nodded and took a sip. A wave of sweetness and warmth spread through his body, leaving behind a refreshing cool sensation. "Not bad," he admitted. The king set down his own cup and turned to Ethan. "You have proven yourself human. You saved my daughter when all others failed." His voice was calm but firm. "Tell me, what will you do now?" Ethan hesitated. That was a good question. Did he even have a choice? "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I came here against my will. But now that I'm here, I suppose I'd like to learn more about your people." A deep chuckle came from across the table. "You speak as if you have a choice," Velos said coldly. "But you do not." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the Zyrelian prince. Velos leaned forward, his expression dark. "You are still an outsider, human. My father may have granted you his favor, but not all of us trust you." His fingers tapped against the table. "Some believe that your presence here is a threat." Ethan set down his cup slowly. "A threat?" He raised an eyebrow. "Because I saved your sister's life." Velos's jaw tightened. "Because you are unpredictable. Because you have already proven that you can change the course of things. And in politics, Doctor, that makes you dangerous." The tension in the hall thickened. Some of the guests nodded in agreement. Others whispered among themselves, uncertain. King Zoreth observed his son carefully but did not interrupt. He was letting this play out. Ethan exhaled slowly, keeping his voice calm. "I didn't come here to get involved in your politics. I didn't ask to be here at all." He looked directly at Velos. "But I won't apologize for saving your sister." Sarah placed a gentle hand on Ethan's arm, as if to calm the storm building between him and her brother. "Velos, please. He means no harm." Velos narrowed his eyes but said nothing. King Zoreth finally spoke. "Enough. We are here to honor the man who saved my daughter's life, not to question his existence." He looked at Ethan. "You will stay as my guest. But be warned, trust is fragile. You have earned my respect, but there are those who will not accept you so easily." Ethan nodded. He understood. But even as the feast continued, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something bigger than just the doubts of a prince. And he was right. A mysterious warning. Later that night, as the palace halls grew quiet, Ethan walked through the dimly lit corridors. The golden walls reflected the soft glow of blue lanterns, casting long shadows around him. He needed fresh air after the tension of the feast. As he reached a balcony overlooking the city, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You must leave Zelia before it's too late." Ethan turned sharply, his hand instinctively reaching for the small medical scanner he carried in his coat, his only tool that could double as a weapon if needed. A hooded figure stepped forward from the darkness. Ethan couldn't see their face, but their voice was urgent. "You are in danger, human." Ethan frowned. "Who are you?" The figure ignored his question. "The king may trust you, but others do not. There are those who believe you should never have been allowed to step foot on this planet. They see you as an infection, just like the one that nearly killed the princess." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let me guess, you're talking about Prince Velos." The figure shook their head. "Not just him. There are forces within the palace that do not wish for peace with outsiders. They will do whatever it takes to ensure you do not leave here alive." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had expected resistance, but not a direct threat on his life. The figure hesitated, then threw something small toward Ethan. He caught it out of reflex. It was a tiny metallic device, no bigger than a coin. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "A message," the figure said. "Listen to it when you are alone. And remember, you may have saved the princess's life, but you may not be able to save your own." Before Ethan could respond, the figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving him alone on the balcony with the mysterious device in his hand. A cold wind blew through the air. Ethan stared at the object in his palm. What had he just gotten himself into? Ethan stood on the balcony, staring at the small metallic device in his palm. The hooded figure had disappeared into the darkness, leaving only their chilling warning behind. His heart pounded. Someone inside the palace wanted him dead. Taking a deep breath, Ethan clenched the device tightly and walked back toward his quarters. The palace was mostly silent now, the grand feast having ended hours ago. Golden torches flickered softly, casting long shadows on the walls as he moved through the hallways. Once inside his chamber, he locked the doors and sat down at a small metallic table. The device was no bigger than a coin, with a tiny button at the center. Carefully, He pressed it. A holographic image flickered to life. A deep robotic voice began to speak. "Human, listen carefully. There is a secret war happening within this palace. Not all of the Zerelian Council agrees with King Zoreth's decision to let you live. Some believe you are a threat to our future. They have spies everywhere. There will be an attempt on your life very soon." Ethan's fingers tightened around the device. "An assassination attempt." The voice continued. "The king's favor can only protect you for so long. If you wish to survive, you must uncover the truth. Find the one called Commander Draxus. He holds the key to the conspiracy against you." The message ended, and the hologram vanished. Ethan sat back, exhaling sharply. His mind raced. Someone inside the palace was plotting against him. And Commander Draxus had answers. He couldn't just sit and wait for an attack. He had to act first. An unexpected ally. The next morning, Ethan moved cautiously through the palace. He needed to find this Commander Draxus, but he had no idea where to start. His best option, Princess Syra. She was the only one he fully trusted. He found her in the royal gardens, where strange silver flowers glowed faintly under the sunlight. She stood near a floating water fountain, gazing at the sky. When she saw Ethan, she smiled warmly. "Doctor, you seem troubled." Ethan didn't waste time. He lowered his voice. "Sarah, I need your help. Do you know someone named Commander Draxus?" Syra's expression changed immediately. The warmth in her eyes disappeared, replaced by caution. "Why do you ask?" Ethan hesitated, then told her everything: the hooded figure, the warning, the secret message about a conspiracy. Syra listened in silence. When he finished, she let out a slow breath. "Commander Draxus is a former royal guardian," she said. "Once, he was my father's most trusted warrior, but he was accused of treason and banished from the palace." Ethan's eyes widened. "Treason? Did he betray the king?" Ethan asked. Syra frowned. "I do not know. Some say he was framed. Others say he planned to overthrow my father. What I do know is that he disappeared into the lower city where the king's authority is weak." Ethan's mind worked quickly. If Draxus was framed, then he might have information about the real traitors inside the palace. "I need to find him," Ethan said firmly. Syra looked troubled. "It is dangerous, Ethan. If the wrong people find out, they will not hesitate to kill you." Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah, I got that part." For a moment, Syra seemed deep in thought. Then she nodded. "I will help you," she said. Ethan felt a wave of relief. He wasn't alone in this journey to the lower city. That night, Ethan and Syra left the palace in secret. They disguised themselves in hooded cloaks to blend in with the crowd. The lower city was vastly different from the Grand Palace. Its streets were filled with merchants, thieves, and mysterious figures who watched strangers with suspicion. Towering neon signs flickered above, and strange mechanical creatures crawled along the walls, scanning people as they passed. "This place is dangerous," Kyra whispered. "Stay close." Ethan nodded. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching them as they moved through the crowded streets. Finally, they arrived at a dark, hidden alleyway. Syra led Ethan to a large metal door and knocked 3 times. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door creaked open. A tall figure with battle-worn armor and a scar across his cheek stepped into the light. His sharp violet eyes scanned Ethan before turning to Syra. "Princess," the man said. His voice was rough but steady. "I never thought I'd see you here." "Draxus," Syra said. "We need your help." The former commander studied Ethan carefully. "You brought a human to me. He is the reason I am alive," Syra said. "And he is in danger." Draxus's eyes narrowed. "Come inside. We have much to talk about." Ethan followed them inside, knowing that whatever secrets lay ahead could change everything. "Ethan," Syra and Draxus moved swiftly through the hidden corridors of the palace. The air was tense. Behind them, alarms blared, signaling that the enemy was already searching for them. They had one chance to stop the coup. Zelia turned to Draxus. "The king, where is he right now?" Draxus didn't hesitate. "The royal throne room. That's where Velos will go first to force him to surrender." Ethan took a deep breath. "Then we have to get there before him." They raced through the palace, their footsteps echoing against the metallic floors. Time was running out. A battle at the throne room. When they arrived at the massive golden doors of the throne room, 2 royal guards blocked their way. "Halt!" One of them raised his weapon. "By order of Prince Velos, no one enters." Zelia stepped forward, her voice commanding. "By order of Princess Zelia, stand down." The guards hesitated, clearly torn. But before they could decide, a group of enemy soldiers appeared behind them, weapons raised. "There they are," one of them shouted. Draxus drew his energy blade and charged forward. "Go. I'll hold them off." Ethan hesitated, but Zelia grabbed his arm. "We have to warn my father." They pushed through the doors just as the battle erupted behind them. Inside, King Zoreth stood at the center of the grand chamber, his golden robes flowing around him. He was surrounded by loyal guards, but their faces showed confusion. "Traitors," the king said, surprised. "What is happening?" "Father, listen to me," Zelia said urgently. "Velos is leading a coup." A loud crash interrupted her. The doors burst open, and Prince Velos entered, flanked by elite warriors. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with cold determination. "Father," Velos said, stepping forward, "it is time." King Zoreth's gaze hardened. "Time for what?" Velos spread his arms. "To step down. You have let weakness enter our kingdom. This human should have never been allowed to live." His eyes flickered toward Ethan. "He has poisoned our future." Ethan clenched his fists, but stayed silent. Zelia took a step forward, her voice trembling with anger. "Velos, you would betray our father." Velos sighed. "This is not betrayal. This is saving our people." The guards in the room looked at each other, unsure of who to follow. Some were loyal to the king, but others hesitated, clearly afraid. Ethan knew what was coming. Velos wasn't here to talk. This was a takeover. The king's choice. King Zoreth took a deep breath. He looked at Velos, then at Zelia, then, finally, at Ethan. His voice was heavy. "I have ruled this kingdom for many years. I have seen war and peace, but never before have I seen such hatred, from my own blood." Velos tensed. "I do not hate you, father. I only do what must be done." The king's expression darkened. "And what is that?" "Kill a man who saved my daughter's life. Declare war on a species we barely understand." Velos lifted his weapon. "If you will not act, then I will." The tension in the room shattered as he raised his hand. "Seize them." His elite warriors charged forward. The fight for the throne. Ethan barely had time to react before a soldier lunged at him. He ducked, narrowly avoiding a strike, then threw a hard punch into the soldier's gut. The enemy stumbled back. Zelia drew her energy staff, moving with graceful precision, as she fought off 2 attackers. The king's loyal guards finally snapped out of their hesitation and joined the fight. The throne room erupted into chaos. Ethan dodged another attack, then grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon. He wasn't a fighter, but he could survive. Across the room, Zelia was locked in combat with Velos himself. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying as they exchanged blows. "You were always father's favorite," Velos growled. Zelia's eyes burned with fury. "And you were always too blinded by your pride." Their fight was fast and brutal. Velos was skilled, but Zelia had something he didn't, a cause worth fighting for. With a sudden, sharp twist, she knocked his weapon aside and pinned him against a pillar. End it. Then Velos spat. You have the chance. But Xyra lowered her staff. I will not become like you. Ethan, breathless and bruised, turned to see the king standing tall amidst the chaos. His voice rang with authority. Enough. The room froze. King Zoreth's golden eyes swept over the battlefield. The remaining traitors lowered their weapons, realizing they had lost. The king stepped toward Velos, his face filled with both pain and disappointment. You are my son, he said, but you are also a traitor. Velos clenched his jaw, but said nothing. With a heavy heart, the king turned to his guards. Take him away. The defeated prince was led out of the room, his rebellion crushed. A new beginning. Silence filled the chamber as the last of the enemy soldiers were captured. The battle was over. Ethan let out a shaky breath. That was intense. Xyra turned to her father. What now? King Zoreth looked at Ethan. You saved my daughter's life, and now you have helped save my throne. He stepped forward. You are no longer an outsider, Ethan. A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. After everything, he was finally accepted. Xyra placed a hand on his shoulder. Thank you. Ethan grinned. Well, I guess I should stick around. Who knows what other trouble you'll get into. Xyra laughed, and for the first time in days, the palace felt at peace. The battle was won. But the story of humans and Zerelians was just beginning. Inside the dimly lit hideout, Ethan carefully observed Commander Draxus. The former royal guardian had an air of authority, despite his worn armor and the faint scar running across his cheek. His violet eyes studied Ethan with suspicion, but he trusted Princess Xyra enough to let them inside. The room was filled with holographic maps, old weapons, and encrypted data pads, suggesting that Draxus had been preparing for something for a long time. Xyra didn't waste any time. Draxus, someone inside the palace, is planning something dangerous. They see Ethan as a threat. Draxus nodded slowly. I know. Ethan blinked. You do. Draxus crossed his arms. For years, I have watched the shadows move within the palace. There is a secret faction, one that believes Zelia must remain pure, untouched by outsiders. His expression hardened. They were furious when your kind was discovered. And now you have saved the princess. That makes you a problem for them. Ethan frowned. Because I saved her. Draxus nodded. Because you proved something they didn't want to believe, that a human could change fate. Xyra inhaled sharply. And you think they are planning something against my father. Draxus turned to her. They already have. King Zoreth is in danger. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Xyra's voice trembled slightly. Who is behind this? Draxus hesitated, then pulled out a small device from his belt. With a click, a hologram flickered to life. A shadowy figure appeared, speaking in low, distorted tones. The king is blind. He welcomes the outsider with open arms. But we know the truth. If the human stays, our world will change forever. We cannot allow it. We must strike first. The king's reign must end. The message ended, leaving heavy silence in the room. Ethan exhaled slowly. That's not good. Xyra clenched her fists. Who sent this message? Draxus's jaw tightened. It came from within the palace. Ethan exchanged a look with Xyra. They both knew what that meant. The traitor was someone close to the king. A desperate plan. Ethan paced the room, his mind racing. So they're planning to remove the king. Do we know when? Draxus shook his head. Not yet, but it will be soon. The king trusts his advisors, which makes him vulnerable. Xyra's golden eyes burned with determination. We must warn him. Draxus sighed. You think he will listen? If you go to him without proof, he will dismiss it as paranoia. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. They needed evidence, something that would force the king to see the truth. Then an idea struck him. What if we find their meeting place? If we catch them in the act, we'll have proof. Draxus considered it. Risky, but possible. Zyra nodded. Where do we start? Draxus pulled up a new map, pointing to a hidden chamber beneath the palace. This is where the secret council meets. If we can get inside, we might hear their final plans. Ethan took a deep breath. Then let's do it. Infiltrating the chamber. Sneaking back into the palace was easier than Ethan expected. Draxus knew secret tunnels that led past the guards, allowing them to slip inside unnoticed. They moved quietly through the dark corridors, finally reaching a hidden passage behind a large statue. Draxus pressed a small panel, and a hidden door slid open. Inside, a spiral staircase led down into darkness. Ethan swallowed. Why is it always dark tunnels? Stardiers smirked. Afraid of the dark, Doctor. Ethan sighed. Let's just get this over with. They descended cautiously, stopping just outside a large chamber. Voices echoed from within. Draxus motioned for silence, and they crept closer, peeking through a small opening. Inside, several high-ranking officials stood in a circle. And in the center, Prince Phalos. Ethan's heart sank. The prince's voice was cold and clear. The time has come. The king must step down. If he refuses, we will make him. One of the officials asked, and the human? Phalos's expression darkened. He dies tonight. Ethan's blood ran cold. Zyra's grip tightened on his arm. They had to get out. Now. But before they could move, the floor creaked beneath Ethan's foot. The voices inside stopped. Who's there? A sharp alarm blared through the chamber. Ethan cursed. They had been caught. The escape. Run, Draxus barked. They turned and sprinted up the staircase, hearing footsteps chasing after them. A bolt of blue energy whizzed past Ethan's head, barely missing him. Okay, they're shooting now. Not good. Ethan gasped. Zyra pressed a button on her wrist, activating a hidden doorway. This way. They burst through the passage just as the guards reached the staircase. Draxus slammed the door shut behind them, locking it. That won't hold them for long. Ethan caught his breath. Well, at least we have proof now. Zyra's expression was grim. Yes, but now they know we have it. Draxus nodded. We must reach the king before they do. Ethan clenched his fists. The final battle had begun.